Hey folks, in this interview, it's all about digital compositing with Joel Robison. He's a photographer and a digital artist. Today, Joel Robison has agreed to join me to blow our collective minds about how he creates the art that he creates in Photoshop. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about photography, obviously. And we're going to go behind the scenes of some of his favorite pieces on Instagram as we kind of browse his Instagram profile while he's driving. Joel, welcome to the program, man.
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm doing really well.
This is gonna be good. You're on the hot seat. Are you nervous now? Now you really have to. You got to blow our minds, man. That's the goal.
Yeah, I mean, with an intro like that, I feel like it's my game to lose at this point.
It is. I set it up, man. It's T-ball, and it's on the stand there. Well, cool, man. Let's dive in. I want to, obviously make most of this about digital compositing and Photoshop in that world because that's kind of how we got connected. But I want to go into the behind the scene of Joel a little bit and how you got started and all this. What's your Spider-Man radioactive spider story?
my origin story. Yeah. I mean, it goes way back to when I was a kid. I was really into Disney animation, Disney animated movies. So it was just sort of like the weirder, the better. So like Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, like those classic Disney movies were sort of my ideal stories. And I really loved drawing as a kid and making a joke about sort of like it's my game to lose. I was really terrible athlete, and I live in a small town in the Canadian mountains. And if you don't play hockey, then you must ski, and if you don't ski, then you must play some other sport. And I don't do any of those. And so growing up, I was just totally fixated on art. I knew that I wanted to be an artist. I had no idea what that meant. I sort of had that cliche vision of like a guy in a white shirt with a palette to like living in an empty studio, like just painting, and like it was just that sort of like cliche artist. But I was like, I really want to be an animator at Disney. That was sort of like my dream job. And I spent years just drawing on everything and like just making my own stories and like trying to really figure out how I was going to do that, how I was going to like make that dream come true. And I kind of got to my mid-teens and I realized like I like it, but I'm not necessarily good at it. And you kind of hit that point then where everyone's expecting you to like find your job and figure out what you're going to do with your life. And I was like, well, I really wanted to be an artist, but I don't think that that's going to work for me. And so I just sort of abandoned art in general. Like it just sort of, I just packed it up and I was like, that was fun while I was a kid, but I don't see a point in doing it now. And it wasn't until I was kind of in my mid-20s and I had gone to college. I was working now full-time. I was working in a school. And I kind of had that nagging feeling like something is missing. And I was like, I just feel like I'm missing something really important in my life. And I tried to pinpoint what it was and I realized it was art. And I kind of went through this very strange time where I tried every type of art that was available to me. So I tried painting and drawing and sculpture, and none of those they didn't really resonate with me. They didn't really fit with where I was or the had to tell. And I kind of came across Flickr at the time. This was like pre-Instagram, pre-Facebook days. And so I came across Flickr and I just was so overwhelmed with the quality of work that was there and just the type of work that was there. I'd never seen photos taken like that before. And the best part of it was that it was just people like me, just regular people that were just creating for the sake of creating. And I was just obsessed with it right away. And it was sort of like me as a kid being obsessed with those cartoons, those animated films. I was just obsessed with like looking at these photos. And I just thought, well, if other people can do this, like I wonder what I can do. And I bought a camera off of eBay, like had no idea what it even was, or like what the buttons did or anything. Like it was just, I went in it totally blind, and I just loved it. And I started to kind of expand, and I started just, taking pictures of grass and flowers and all that stuff that we do. And then I just moved to really trying to tell stories in my photos, and I realized that it was sort of my way to connect with other people, and that's sort of the beginning of how everything shifted in my life to photography.
That's great. And see, that's the perfect origin story, right? It's almost, that was
It's
almost
like
like
a
the
full
classic,
circle.
the hero's journey,
Yeah.
right? That's the
Yeah.
hero's
Yeah.
journey. On that, so one question I have for a lot of artists that aren't specifically creating works that are like, I'm just documenting a particular situation or something like that.
Hmm.
People that create things from scratch, kind of, or create a piece of work that is the sum of several different parts. In your case, when you're creating these composites, is it, which comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? So are you sitting there and you have all these sort of disparate pieces and you figure out a creative way to synthesize them into something interesting? Or do you start with kind of like this burning story in your head that you feel like you have to execute? Like, I got to create this shot, and then you go get the pieces and then put it together. How does it work for you?
I think I'm like a blend of both of those. So I have like a very organized creative side, and then a very like spontaneous creative side. And when I was first starting out, it was very spontaneous. So I would just sort of go out into the woods and like go out into the forest near where I lived, and I would just see what happened, and I would just create stuff. And it was fun and it was exciting, but the the pieces of work that I was creating weren't necessarily personal to me. They didn't have like a personal connection or a deeper story to me. And then over time, and I would say especially lately in the last probably 5 years, more of my work now is more concise. So it's more thought out. So I do sit and think about, my own personal experiences that I'm going through at the moment, or, global experiences that are going on, certain words that I kind of attached to, or emotions that I'm attached to. And then I tried to find a way to, if I was going to tell a story about that experience, but I wanted it to be abstract, how could I tell that story without it being necessarily what it is? So it sounds kind of like, it might sound complicated, but to me, it's sort of like taking an idea of like, okay, with social isolation now is such a huge thing. Like we're isolated away from people. We have to remain distant from people. So how can I tell the story of what it feels like to be distant away from people, but in an uplifting and creative way? So what does that look like? And so a lot of my work is based on that workflow of spending time by myself, understanding myself, and then figuring out how I can express what I'm thinking about in a creative way, and then going out and shooting all the pieces, all the components for that, and then coming back and putting it together. And then the more spontaneous side of me is sort of like, let's just put a whole bunch of weird stuff in a backpack, and we will just walk out into the woods and see what happens.
Yeah.
And both sides of those are really fun. I think that I'm more personally attached to the first type because they're obviously more thought out and I think about them more often. But then the spontaneous side is also fun because you just never know what happens. And sometimes those ones end up being just like more about pushing my own ideas at the time, or seeing what I can come up with wherever I am. Like, okay, I'm in this location. I might not come here again. So what can I do while I'm here? And how can I be creative instantly?
Yeah, that's interesting. So like it's sort of exploring the, I'm a creative. I have the gear to create. I'm gonna put myself in a situation and I'm
Yeah.
gonna see what, almost like fishing, right? Like I have my
Yeah.
fishing
Yeah.
rod. I know there's fish in that ocean. I'm gonna cast it and see what I get. And right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
It's
that's
almost as well like musicians. Like a musician can sit and write a song, or they can go to a jam session. And the writing a song obviously takes a lot of skill, and it takes a lot of time. But a jam session takes a lot of skill just in a different way. So it's just trusting your skill and trusting your instinct at the time, like knowing how to create in the moment, which
I
is
love it.
is fun.
Yeah, take us a little bit behind the scenes of when you're creating one of these pieces, like what is like tactily, what does the your workstation look like? Are you on a big giant Alienware machine, or are, you know, I've spoken to artists that create crazy stuff on a decade-old MacBook Pro, you know, and a mouse. Where do you fall in there in terms of the gear you use to execute on?
So for the past year, I've been using, I mean, it is a pretty giant screen. It is a Microsoft Surface Studio. So it's like editing on a big screen TV, and
Wow.
it's beautiful. It's amazing. I see so many more details than anyone will ever notice, which is, it's kind of frustrating when you're like zoomed in and you're just editing like pixel by pixel, and like you're thinking no one is ever gonna know if this pixel is there or not. Like,
You will know.
but
You will know.
no. Now that I've seen it, I know it exists. So I've been using that. And when I travel, because I travel quite a lot as well, I use a Microsoft Surface Book. And the great thing is that they're all kind of tactile screens, so you can just edit right on the screen, which I don't have to worry about extra tablets and cords and all that stuff to forget, because I will forget it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's sort of the editing side. So I try to keep things pretty minimal. I don't like to have, I'm not a gear person. I'm just sort of, I really advocate for people to create with what they have access to. And I mean, up until even last year, I was using like a Wacom tablet that cost me like $80. Like, it was the cheapest one on the shelf. And people would always be surprised, like, why don't you use the nice like Bluetooth like $400 one? And I was like, they do the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
one's just
With
a little bit
less complexity.
nicer. Like, yeah, like I'm just using like a tiny playing card size of this tablet. So why would I buy one that's like 5 times the size and the price? So,
Yeah.
yeah, I just advocate for people to use the tools you have, and become a master at what you have.
All right. Well, cool. That's sage words, because you know the industry, right? It's a depending on who you talk to, it's a, you know, you got to have the latest and greatest
Yeah,
camera,
the
latest and
newest.
greatest
Yeah,
lights,
yeah,
drones, software,
yeah.
on and on and on. You could easily get lost and go broke
Oh,
chasing that
definitely.
horizon for sure. Let's look at some of the work. I'd love to see some of
Cool,
your favorite pieces. So I'll bring up your screen here
cool.
if I can. Let's see. Here we go. There we go.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah, so this is obviously an Instagram account. It's sort of, I got started on Flickr, and then I moved from Flickr to Facebook when Flickr was sort of on its way out, and then I moved from Facebook to Instagram, and now I sort of cultivate all of them. But I enjoy the community part of Instagram, and it's probably where I post the most. So these are the most recent posts. Um,
Wow.
this is probably a good one to share. This is like a post that about 6 years ago, I moved to the UK, and I had no idea what I was going to do when I went there, and I didn't know where I was going to shoot. I shoot a lot in nature, so I was like paranoid that I was not going to ever be around nature for some reason. And I was really lucky that I found a spot that had a lot of beautiful areas. So these are some images that I created living in the UK, and it just became a really peaceful place and a really great place to create and kind of develop my skills and see a different part of the world. And
These are great.
I,
These are great. So when you're creating these, and for folks that are listening to the audio version of this podcast, definitely pop over and watch the video either on thisweekinphoto.com or on the YouTube channel. But these I see a theme in these, other than, you know, some of the self portraiture, but I see
yeah.
kind of a theme of, I don't know. They're very emotional, right? I see a lot of emotion in these, like, and you tell me about that piece of it. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'd rather, you know, have you sort of explain the direction of some of these and why they feel the way they feel.
Yeah, I mean, even I'll open up this one. So I think pretty early on, like when I first started in photography, it was a little over, or a little bit more than a decade ago, and I was in a very different place in my life. I was in a really unhealthy relationship, and I was not happy, and I was looking for kind of a way out. And photography, it started off as a hobby, and then it quickly became more of like a passion. And then with that, it became sort of a meditation or even therapy. And I realized that I could really put all of what I was thinking or feeling or going through into an image, and I could be as literal or as I could be as abstract as I wanted. And I kind of was like, that's my like superpower.
Hmm.
Now, like I can tell a story without it being obvious. I can put all of what I'm going through into an image, and I can tell people exactly what I'm going through, or I know that it's there, but they can see something else. And I think that is a beautiful thing about art, is that it is subjective. We experience it differently, and I love that about creating, is that I might have a very personal attachment or reason, but someone else might have a different feeling. And like these pictures, like this picture in general with these umbrellas, it was really about sort of dealing with my own sexuality and feeling pushed down for so long, and just finally getting to the point where I was like, you know what, I don't care, no one else should care, I've
Yeah.
just myself. And it was just sort of that feeling of like breaking through that. And so many of my pieces of work now especially are created from just like a personal experience or a personal relation that I want to share or show that this is what I'm going through. And if anyone else is going through the same thing, I want them to feel understood. And I definitely still create for fun and just like out of the fun of it. Like the Halloween kind of ones are just more for fun, and like Christmas time, the same thing. But definitely, I think the majority of my work is definitely fueled by my own desire to kind of learn more about myself and then also share that in a creative way.
And I think that makes it, obviously by design, it makes it more personal, from the
Yeah.
standpoint of this is coming from a more personal place. Like you said, be without telling a story without being literal. Like you said about
Yeah.
your sexuality, right? Without saying,
Yeah.
let me be explicit about how I'm feeling, boom, 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 right now. You can tell that story through pixels instead of
Yeah.
like some people, you know who you are, Facebook posts, that
Yeah.
that
Vague
just go.
booking. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, where you just like, let me tell you all about myself. You could
Oh yeah. Yeah.
absolutely use your, like you said, use your superpower and tell a story that way. I think it's fantastic. That is really cool. There's some, yeah, let's bring your screen back up here. Look at this work. I see some umbrellas in
Yeah.
here. I see hearts,
Yeah.
the repeating themes.
There's a
I
lot
think,
of there's a lot of repeating themes, yeah. And one thing that I teach workshops or classes, and I have a Patreon as well, and I always suggest to artists, if you are the type of artist like where you are controlling the elements of what you do, and even if you're just a landscape photographer or astrophotographer or portrait photographer, it really works for everyone, is to find like visual connections to your work and you. And so umbrellas for me always kind of represent sort of making it through like a dark time, because we use them as a way to protect ourselves. We use them as a way to protect ourselves from rain. But the visual connection is like you can use those to symbolize getting through something or working your way through something. And so a lot of the images that are repeated, I've used them on purpose because they reflect a specific idea at that time that I'm going through, or the specific time in life. And I shared it not too long ago, was here. So I have like this series of images that are like floating teapots or teapots in general. And I just wanted to create a series, especially the floating ones, where, having a cup of tea or sharing a hot drink with someone is like comforting. And it reminds me of being home. And about it's about 8 years ago now, I moved out of my house and I ended that relationship and I went on a world tour, and life was crazy. And when I was feeling kind of that nervousness about all these life changes, I created this photo of like this floating teacup. And I just used that as a way to kind of connect back to myself, and was like, oh, no matter where I am, like home can be there too. And so I created like this series of images that are based around these floating teapots. So there's like this series of like different teapots. It's sort of floating in the air, pouring into a cup. And it was just sort of that idea that no matter where you are, like you can feel comfortable, you can feel at home. And I like to kind of blend those visual connections that I feel with the work that I'm doing.
yeah, it's almost like like in that series, it's kind of like home is where the teapot is, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
every
Yeah. It's like it
everything
follows me
around it,
around.
yeah, everything
Yeah.
around it
And
can change, but this is,
that poor teapot has been through some things. It's seen a lot of things.
that's awesome. I had a friend that used to do that. I think a lot of people used to do that. They travel around and like have some sort of totem with them, that
Yeah.
they would photograph in all these different locations, like Red Square and on an
Yeah.
iceberg in
Yeah.
Iceland, and on the Golden Gate Bridge and that kind of thing. No, I love that. Are you like when you we touched on this a little bit before, but when you're coming up with the idea for one of these, like say it's one of the Teapot series, do you have a sketchbook or kind of an idea of what you want to create, or is it just kind of stored in there and then you go and execute it?
I am a lover of notebooks, and I kind of I don't, I mean, I won't be around when it happens, but the day that I'm not alive on this planet and someone has to go through all of those notebooks, it's going to be an interesting day for that person because they're filled with like, it's like ramblings from, just my brain and just words that connect. And like, it's sort of like, I really love mind maps. So when I used to work in a school and we used mind maps a lot, and it's just like, this visual explosion. It's like a brain explosion on a sheet of paper. And so many of the pages of my notebooks are just like that, where it's like one word in the middle and then just blown up all around it, like all the words that I could think of. But I do have a sketchbook, and I do sketch a lot of the ideas that I plan ahead, just so I know in my head what it looks like, and it becomes almost a game of like matching the final image to the one in my head. And I used to be a lot less picky about it. When I first started, I was doing like the 365 project, which is taking a photo every day for a year.
Yeah.
And when you're doing a project like that, you don't have the luxury of time to be kind of picky. You have to just blow through it. And I wasn't as like concerned if things looked great. I was more concerned about finishing. And then after I finished those projects, I did 4 of them. I realized like, okay, I need to slow down and I need to just make sure that I'm really happy with the work that I'm doing. And I mean, it comes and it goes. I think we're always going to be happy with some of what we do and unhappy with some of what we do because we're always growing, we're always learning new things. But I think now I really enjoy the process of sitting, coming up with a solid idea, drawing it out, making sure that it does tell the story that I want it to tell, and then going out and creating it.
Yeah, I love that. And that's one of the cool things about photography is you can build these kind of ideas like you said in your sketchbook and then go execute them, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's serendipity, where it's I kind of want to do something like this and you go create and capture the shots, or if it's more structured where you have this burning desire to create this series of, let's call it, 4 teapot images, and
Yeah.
you sketch them out meticulously and then go execute according to your plan. I love it. I love it. So okay, so would you like I'll bring up your screen here again, and I'm curious just to
Cool.
kind of go behind the scene of one of these shots, and like one of
Okay.
the more technically challenging shots. And
Let's find
what
one.
is what does it look? Yeah, all of them, right? But what does it look like on the back
Fairly
end of creating
underwhelming, I
one?
think. I feel like it's fairly underwhelming. I mean, I should have put in some more behind the scenes, but I
No,
mean,
no, this is good.
they're all. I mean, it all looks much different. I mean, this one, for instance, like I shot that like with playing cards in front of just a window and my arms just in front of a window, and sort of used the back plate that I had, and it all looks like it takes up more time than it actually does. It's sort of the awkward part when I'm shooting photos of other people. Like it's the shooting part is actually usually quite simple. And so like I think people expect it to be a much more engaged process, but it's quite
Yeah.
easy. Like even this one, like the bubble was really there. I just blew a bubble on this flower that was in our driveway, and it just the sun was setting, and it just looked really cool. And just shot a portrait of myself at the same time in the same light, and it just worked together so simple. So I think it's like just getting comfortable with ideas and being comfortable trying things. I think that's the biggest thing, and you have to be willing to be bad at things. Like when I first
Yeah.
started, my style was all over the place, and I did all sorts of weird stuff with like artificial light and like weird portrait, like self portraits up close to my face, and like face painting and like all sorts of weird stuff that I would never do now. But you have to do all of that to know what you're good at and what you want to do. So it's just like trusting the process and trusting the whole, like trying something, being bad at it, keeping going with it until you can figure it out. And I think that's the fun part about creating, is like, you don't have to be good at something right away. You can spend the time to develop that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the tools are there, right? To allow you to do this
Exactly.
stuff.
Yeah.
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 Is it like, for people that are watching this and they're like, yeah, I want to be like Joel Robison, like how do they move in that direction to get up to your skill level? Is it like there's one school of thought that says, hey, just look at people you admire and try to, embrace and extend and be inspired by their work.
Mm.
And then there's another school that says, take courses and learn the ins and
Yeah.
outs of masking and paths and all this stuff,
Yeah.
and then go execute. And tell me where you fall in this. My thought is, or at least, this is the way that my brain tends to absorb things better, is through self projects, and where I give myself something challenging to do that I don't know how to do, and then execute on it, and then build my skill set along the way. Well, how would you recommend learning how to get to be a world-class compositor like yourself?
I mean, I don't think that I'm. I wouldn't give myself that title, but
I did. I just gave it to you. So
I, I guess I'll take it. Yeah, I think I fall into the same notion of you really just have to go out there and do it, and use the tools that are available to you. I always make a joke that I've only ever taken one photography course in my whole life. I was in 12th grade. It was a black and white film photography course. It was like a 2-week course, and I hated absolutely every minute of it. Like, I hated the whole process. I didn't enjoy, from loading the film to developing the film. I hated every minute of it. And I was like a great student in school. I loved school. And that was like, for some reason, that was the one thing that I just didn't like. And I told my then teacher, when I handed in my assignment, like, I hated this. I hated every minute of it. And she's like, I know, I could tell. And I was like, I'm never going to use these skills ever. I'm never going to be a photographer. I'm never going to need to know how to use a camera. And I pretty much just like told that to her face. And not only did I end up obviously eating those words, but I then ended up working with that teacher when I worked in the same school with her. And now I frequently go to her class and I present to her students as a working photographer. So it's like, I really have to eat those words. But I think that shows you that we live in such an amazing time with so many resources available to us for free. And even if they're not free, you can pay so little to learn so much. And we're inundated with so many opportunities to learn. And I think sometimes we get overwhelmed by that. I think we don't know where to start. So I think the best thing that anyone can do to start is just to kind of shut out the world and just create things on your own. And I think that was the luxury that I had when I started, was that there weren't that many people doing it. So I didn't feel influenced that much by other people. I didn't feel influenced by what I was seeing, because this was before Instagram. It was before Facebook. This was just with Flickr. And I mean, even then there wasn't that many people doing it. And so I kind of gave myself an opportunity just to go out and take pictures. And if they worked, they worked. If they didn't, they didn't, and carved away at it slowly. Yeah. And I think that's the best advice I could have for someone, is to just take your time, and there's no rush, and you really want to show what life is like for you. And I really try to tell, students or other artists, when they ask for advice on how to get successful or how to find your way, is that you're really the only you that we have. You're the only one. And that is a lot of pressure. And going off of that, Spider-Man notion, with great power comes with great responsibility. And there's a great responsibility in being the only you that we have, because you're the only one that gets to tell your stories, your dreams, your fears, what it's like to live your life. And so you can copy other people, or you can get inspired by other people, and that's fine, but that's not telling your story. It's not necessarily telling what it's like to be you. And that is the wonderful part about art, is that it's an ability to show us what it is to be you. And I think that when we get to see what life is like in the eyes of someone else, it really gives us all a better understanding of the world, and it lets us appreciate things in a different way. And so to get to a level where you feel successful, I think it really starts with figuring out what it is that you want to say and what you want to do and what message you want to have, and really focus on showing what that looks like from your point of view.
Love that. I love that. Very well said. You know, one of the challenges, I think, especially in today's world of social media and let's call it perceived perfection, right?
Hmm.
Is that very thing, which I think will short circuit a lot of photographers. You know, you've successfully navigated that, and you've found a way to kind of show another side of you and kind of use your art, like you said, as a superpower and show where things are going. A lot of photographers or people in general, I think, on the internet or on social media, it's all about like the Kardashians, right?
Hmm.
I gotta show the best unrealistic version of myself, or I
Yeah.
can't even show myself. I have to show other things, and I'm just the man or the woman behind the curtain, right?
Yeah,
So, yeah.
exactly.
How do you bridge that? I know you don't have all the answers, but how do you bridge? What's a way to bridge that to go from the you know, navigating the unrealistic expectation of putting forth a false avatar of yourself and
Mm.
transitioning instead into putting forward a vulnerable, raw version of yourself, even if it is, like you said, sort of abstracted in subjective art.
Yeah, I think, I mean, like you said, social media is just such a different world. And
Yeah.
I'm an introvert by nature, so I don't enjoy, I enjoy putting myself out there to a limit, but I don't necessarily like to put my real self out there. So I almost treat myself like a character more than a person.
Hmm.
But I think that if you have the ability to use social media, it's such an amazing opportunity, just like with photography, like I said, to show what it is like to be you and to let people into your corner of the world. And I think that that's such an amazing thing that we can do. I think that we get caught in this idea that everything we do has to be monetized and everything that we do has to be going to pay us off somehow. And I think that that's such a disappointing way to treat anything, that we have to do it so that it pays us back, or so that it becomes my way out, or it becomes the way I make a living. And when I first started in photography, it was purely a hobby. I had no idea that you could even make money doing it. And I didn't make money doing it for the first few years that I was doing it. And I think that it showed me that it meant something to me without having to focus on it being, something that had money attached to it. And I think for social media, I find the most joy in it when I look at the community aspect of it, rather than the sort of platform itself, or sort of the structure of it, because the structure of social media is just horrible. And if you watch the social dilemma, I think that's what it was called. um yeah, it's scary. It's scary
Yeah.
just how much focus they want us to have on it. And really, the beautiful part about social media is the social aspect of it, of connecting with people, learning about people. And I've been so lucky to meet so many amazing friends through it. And that's the wonderful part about it, is that you can use it to share your skills and your talents, and share what life is like for you. And then also use it to amplify the voices of other people as well, or to connect to other people. And so for me, I use social media as my platform to share my work, but also to connect with other people, and to learn about other people, and to enjoy what other people do. I enjoy looking at other people's work more than I enjoy looking at my own. And I
Yeah.
spend more time looking at other people's stuff than I do looking at mine, because that's the joy of having it there.
I love it. I love it. Cool stuff, man. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me. This
Of
is
course.
inspiring and on several different levels, from just looking at the work to also just sort of, opening up my mind, and I hopefully people that are listening and watching to this, opening up minds as to why and how you create art, or they can
Yeah.
create art versus it being, you know, not even altruistic, because altruistic sounds like charity or something, but more of just you're creating art because you want to create art, and you want to tell a story without telling a story, without being explicit about it. And you can use pixels, and the sky's the limit. Like literally a blank page. You create whatever you want, however you want, whenever you want these days. So yeah, I appreciate it. If people want to connect with you and they want to see your work, we were showing. I'll bring up your Instagram again real quick as we wrap up. If people want to connect,
cool, yeah.
with
I can
you,
scroll up to the top.
Yeah, scroll up so we can see the profile name. Is this the best place for them to go?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great start. And obviously, I have the website, which is just joelrobison.com. And then I also have a Patreon, which is linked here at the bottom. And the Patreon is set up almost like a class. So it's set up to be sort of a monthly class. So I have different tiers, and they range from $1 up to $45 a month. And with them comes blog posts, video tutorials, behind the scenes, Photoshop background templates that you can Photoshop yourself into, wallpapers, all sorts of stuff. And it's sort of a way to really build community and to let people try to expand their own creativity. But on social, you can find me pretty much everywhere. I'm pretty easy to find. And I do really enjoy that part of it. And so if anyone has messages or questions, I always answer them. So Instagram is always a great start.
Yeah. All roads lead there. That's cool. Are you on Facebook at all? Are you?
I am. Yeah. Facebook. Facebook.com/Joel Robison Photography is my page there too.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
I know we're toying. We can't talk about it right now, but we're toying with some other projects that we may work on together. So we'll talk again soon.
Awesome.
All right. Take care.